Just so you know, Mom, Grant works in audits, Tessa said into her phone. He is not the type to cause a scene. I stood by the sink with my keys, listening to my own wife shrink me down for her mother. It hit like a slap. I kept my mouth shut and let her finish. My name was Grant Sutter. I was 57 years old, living in the same Canton row house in Baltimore I had owned since my 30s. Earlier that year, my granddad passed and left me just over $21 million once the dust settled, plus a handful of plain investments that mailed steady checks. I still drove a beat-up Accord and dressed like a regular guy. I did not like attention, and I sure did not like people treating me like a wallet with legs. Tessa knew I hated public conflict. She had watched me swallow disrespect in restaurants just to keep the peace. Her mother, Marilyn Hollis, mistook that for weakness. Marilyn loved a crowd, and she loved paperwork. Put a folder, a pen, and a notary in front of a man with people watching, and most men will sign to end the discomfort. Marilyn counted on that. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you are watching from. And let's continue. Tessa clicked off the call and turned, smiling too bright. We are going to my parents' place outside Charlottesville tonight, she said. Just dinner. Just dinner, I repeated. She stepped close and lowered her voice. Please, Grant, just try. We had been together a little over 4 years, married for almost 3. She was 49 and built for rooms full of important people. She managed branding for a luxury cosmetics line and still went by Tessa Hollis at work because her family name opened doors. I was a partner at a forensic accounting shop, the guy people called when money disappeared. I made good money, but I kept that part quiet. Most days were fine. But when her family came up, Tessa got careful. Be patient with my mom. Do not take Kendra seriously. They are old-fashioned. She said it before anything even happened, like she was trying to pad the corners of every conversation. That Friday in late September, I could have shown up dressed like the man I was on paper now. Instead, I pulled on a plain navy button-down, clean jeans, and my scuffed brown boots. Not sloppy, just normal. I did not correct her when she told Marilyn I was in audits like I pushed spreadsheets in a back room. I wanted to see how they treated a man they thought did not matter. We rolled up the long gravel drive to a big white house with porch lights that looked expensive. Tessa squeezed my hand one more time. I killed the engine, grabbed the wine, and walked up the steps. Marilyn opened the door before we could knock. She wore pearls and a tight smile that looked glued on for company, not family, and her perfume hit me before her words did. Her eyes traveled down my shirt, lingered on my boots, then slid past me like the real guest was still in the driveway. Grant, she said, letting my name hang in the air. How practical. Tessa stepped in fast, hugging her mother and talking over the awkward beat like she could smooth it out with enough charm. I walked in behind her and kept my shoulders loose, even though the house felt like a museum that charged admission. Fresh flowers sat in perfect vases, counters gleamed, and every framed photo looked like it came out of a magazine spread. Kendra showed up late, sweeping in with a clack of heels and zero apology. She air-kissed near my cheek and smiled like she was inspecting a used car. "So you are the husband," she said, eyes flicking up and down again. I pictured you taller. Trent, her husband, gave me a quick, sorry look and moved to the side like he was used to getting out of the line of fire. Warren was already at the table, sitting straight with his napkin folded like rules mattered more than comfort. He shook my hand once and said, "Good to see you," in the same tone a man uses for a cashier. Marilyn hovered, correcting little things before they even happened, and Kendra watched my hands like she wanted me to trip. The questions came with the salad. Where did I go to school? What did my parents do? Where did I grow up? And did Baltimore feel safe these days? When I said my parents died when I was young and my granddad raised me, Marilyn made a soft sound that should have been sympathy but came out like judgment. "That explains a lot," she murmured, then lifted her eyebrows like she had solved a puzzle. She leaned forward and asked what my real role was at my firm. "Do you help the partners, or are you more support staff?" She said, smiling like she was being helpful. Tessa laughed at the exact wrong moment and rushed in with, "Grant is great at what he does, Mom," then tried to steer the talk toward travel and wineries. Marilyn did not bite. "We just worry you will feel out of place around successful people," she said, and Tessa's eyes begged me to swallow it. Kendra took that opening and poured Spencer Carver all over the table. "Spencer just understands our world," she said, slowly swirling her wine. "Private equity connections, and he always knew which charity to support without being told." Marilyn nodded along like Spencer was a credential, and Warren kept his gaze on his plate like he was waiting for the meal to end. By the time dessert hit, I recognized the rhythm. It was the same rehearsed friendliness I saw in conference rooms right before someone lied to my face. Tessa leaned close and whispered, "I know they are being awful, but please just get through tonight." And I answered with a calm nod as I cut into the cake and took a deliberate bite. I set my fork down and Marilyn was already on her feet, collecting plates like she was clearing a stage. "Coffee in the sitting room," she announced, and nobody argued. We filed into a spotless room with stiff couches, and Warren and Trent drifted to the windows with their cups, talking numbers in a low murmur. Marilyn tipped her chin at Tessa and said, "Sweetheart, go help Kendra with something." And my wife popped up so fast it looked trained. As she moved, I caught her phone glow under her hand, the screen disappearing the second it lit. She had been checking it all night like she was waiting on a signal, and it made my skin crawl. I kept my voice polite and said, "I'm going to use the restroom." Then I walked out before anyone could hand me another test. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the house, quiet in a way that told me nobody ever argued here where guests could hear. I passed a study with the door half closed and heard Marilyn's voice change from sugary to sharp. Kendra answered her in a tight rush, and my feet stopped on their own as I eased behind a bookcase. "I'm telling you, we cannot carry another quarter like this," Marilyn snapped, and the words hit hard in that fancy house. Kendra hissed back, "I told you the lenders are already nervous, so stop acting like we have time to play." Marilyn's tone went lower, meaner, and she said, "Spencer's family will not sign until Tessa is free of this mistake." Kendra gave a short laugh, and she said my name like it was dirt. "Grant is temporary, Mom. He is a placeholder. We needed a husband on her arm until we finished the deal." Marilyn didn't defend me for even a second, and that silence told me exactly how the women in that family worked. They moved on like they were planning a brunch. Marilyn said the anniversary gala was in 3 weeks, big guest list, press, and the right people watching, and Kendra said, "That is when we announce the partnership and steady the brand." Then Kendra added, "We put paperwork in front of him, post-marital, and we get him to sign the guarantee." Marilyn answered, "He will do it because he wants to keep Tessa happy, and he hates making a scene." Marilyn kept going, calm as ice. "If the business still collapses, he becomes the reason." We say he meddled, overstepped, and pressured Warren. Kendra sounded almost cheerful when she said, "We can discover something later, a gambling problem, an affair, anything." My stomach rolled, and I forced myself to walk away before my face gave me up. In the bathroom, I gripped the sink and splashed cold water until my pulse slowed down. The mirror showed a tired man, not a broken one, and I straightened my collar like I was getting ready for work. I walked back to the sitting room, let a calm smile settle on my mouth, and sat down beside Tessa like I hadn't heard a thing. I sat there with my expression steady while Marilyn floated around refilling cups and Kendra laughed too loud at her own jokes. Tessa slid back in beside me like nothing happened, and her knee brushed mine under the coffee table like a quiet warning to stay manageable. When the night finally ended, Marilyn hugged Tessa and barely touched my shoulder with her fingertips like I might stain her sweater. In the car, the silence lasted all the way to the end of their driveway. Tessa stared straight ahead, then finally said, "Are you okay, Grant? Because you were very quiet in there tonight." Her voice sounded careful, like she was trying not to set off a smoke alarm. I kept my eyes on the road and said, "I'm fine, and your mother has strong opinions about everything." Her shoulders dropped, and she let out a small breath like she had been bracing for impact. That told me plenty, because if she was innocent, she would have been mad for me instead of relieved I stayed quiet. She reached over and squeezed my forearm and said, "Thank you for not making it worse." Like I had done her a favor by swallowing disrespect. Over the next week, she started guiding me toward the corner they wanted. It came in soft little lines while she unloaded groceries or folded laundry, like she was trying to make it sound normal. "Dad is under pressure right now," she said one night, then added, "Mom is stressed and Kendra is doing everything she can." A day later, she hit me with, "If we can just get through the gala, everything settles down." Then she mentioned a meeting with their attorney like it was a dentist appointment. "It's just standard spousal paperwork so the banks know we're aligned," she said, watching my face too closely. I nodded and acted grateful because at work I had learned you do not stop a con by yelling early. You stop it by letting people commit to their story while you collect the receipts. The meeting happened in a bright office that smelled like leather chairs and expensive coffee. The lawyer smiled like he knew me, even though we had never met, and he slid a neat stack of documents toward me with a pen placed just right. Tessa sat close, shoulder angled toward me and said, "See, it's all routine, so please do not overthink it." I flipped through slowly and said, "I want copies so my own guy can review what I'm being asked to sign." Tessa's smile tightened, and she answered too fast. "There's no need for that, because it will only complicate things." The lawyer cleared his throat and stared at the paper like he wished he was anywhere else. 2 days later, Warren called me for the first time ever, and his voice sounded like he had to force it out. He asked if I could meet him for coffee near his office, and I said yes without acting surprised. In the daylight, he looked older, like sleep had stopped working for him, and he kept both hands wrapped around his cup like it was an anchor. He did not confess and he did not apologize, but he finally said, "Whatever they put in front of you, do not sign it at the gala, and do not do it that night." I held his eyes and said, "I hear you." Then I stood up and walked out before he could take it back. That afternoon, I called Gordon Hale, the semi-retired investor I had bumped into through clients over the years, and I kept my tone casual on purpose. I'm trying to understand the Hollis business a little better, I said, because they keep talking like I'm supposed to be involved. Gordon paused, then said, "Your granddad was Frank Sutter, wasn't he?" And I stopped pacing long enough to answer, "Yes, he was." Gordon's voice hardened in a quiet way. "Frank saved me from a bad deal once, and he did it without making a show," he said, then added, "The Hollises tried to squeeze Frank years back, and he never forgot it, and neither did I. He did not promise revenge, and he did not need to, because his last line landed clean. If they're trying to rope you into something, I want to know," he said, and I opened a new note on my phone and captured it. I kept the note open and typed Gordon's line word for word, then I drove back to Baltimore with my jaw locked. At home, I played the same part, asked Tessa if she wanted tea, and waited until she disappeared upstairs before I opened my laptop and went to work. For the next few nights, I stayed up after midnight doing quiet digging. I pulled public records, court filings, business registrations, and UCC liens, then laid them out in a plain spreadsheet. I color-coded the dates and watched the debt pile up like layers of paint. On the surface, the Hollis Wellness chain looked clean, but the filings were ugly. Refinances stacked on refinances, vendor suits for unpaid invoices, and a franchise renewal clause coming up that could sink them if they missed standards at the next review. Then a small consulting company kept showing up in the payables trail. Same address, same bank, same tidy invoices, always right before payroll hit. Half the invoices were one line with no detail, like they dared anyone to ask. It was not proof by itself, but it looked like money being scooped out in neat little cups, so I flagged every payment and kept moving. Gordon introduced me to a former controller who had left for health reasons. He would not meet, and he did not offer files, but he did answer my call. "I cannot hand you anything," he said, "but I can tell you where to look if you want the truth." I told him I wanted direction, not gossip, and he said, "Follow Marilyn's charity foundation, the one she loves to parade in magazines, and compare the vendor names." Once I had the foundation name, the pattern tightened. Donations came in, grants went out, and that same consulting vendor appeared around the same weeks like it had two pipelines feeding it. The foundation filings were public and read like bedtime stories, but the dates lined up with the company's panic. It still was not enough to accuse anyone on a hunch, but it explained how Kendra lived loud while the business begged banks for mercy. While I worked, Trent started texting me like a man trying to talk himself down. "Did you know we are behind on the equipment lease?" he asked, and later, "Is it normal to pay vendors through a foundation?" I wrote back, "It is not normal, and you should not ask that in writing if Kendra has your passcode." He was not trying to help me yet. He was trying to settle his own nerves. After a long pause, he replied, "Can we meet somewhere quiet?" I met him for a beer at a plain place off the highway, and he showed up looking wrung out. He kept his voice low and said, "Kendra moves money around and Marilyn covers it with charity talk, and I am starting to panic." I held his eyes and said, "If you have seen email threads, I need them before they try to make me sign anything." He nodded and answered, "I saw chains on her laptop by accident, and I can forward screenshots, but I have to do it without tipping her off." Then he started scrolling through his phone at the table. I slid a napkin across with a secure address and watched him save it. Trent nodded after saving the address, and I paid the tab and drove home with both hands tight on the wheel. The gala sat on the calendar like a loaded appointment, and Tessa felt it coming because she started tightening the screws the minute I walked back through our front door. It started with little jabs while she stood at my closet pinching my shirts like they embarrassed her. "Maybe do not talk about work so much around them," she said. "Maybe let Mom lead the conversation, and do not bring up your car or your friends like they are charming." When I asked what she wanted from me, she said, "I want you to make this easy for once." One night, she slid a folder across the kitchen table and called it bank stuff with that bright, careful smile. I opened it and saw spousal consent, lender disclosure, and authorization to pledge marital assets stamped across the top pages. I kept my face flat and asked, "Why would a bank need my consent to put our household on the hook for a business I do not own?" She did not blink when she answered. "It is just how these families do things, so please do not make it a problem," she said. That was still nothing, so I told her my attorney would review every page. Her voice snapped sharp. "That will embarrass my parents," she said, then flipped the switch back to soft and took my hand. "Please, Grant, I am asking you." The next week, she announced a late client dinner in Richmond and kissed me goodbye like it was routine. Her phone lit up on the counter as she walked out, and I did not touch it, but the name was huge on the screen. Spencer. She came home hours later smelling like expensive cologne that was not mine, and when I asked where she had been, she said, "You are imagining things, and I am tired of being accused." 2 nights later, she used the same excuse, and I did what I hated doing. I drove past the restaurant she named and watched the entrance for 10 minutes, and her car never showed. I took the next turn and checked the quieter place Gordon mentioned Spencer liked, and I saw Tessa through the window, leaning in close and smiling like she had not smiled at me in weeks. I stayed outside, snapped a couple photos, and walked away. The next morning, I called Diane Morrow, the compliance head for the franchise brand the Hollises depended on. Gordon had made the introduction, but I kept it clean. I have concerns about governance and financial controls, I said, and I can share documentation if you handle it discreetly. Diane's voice stayed flat. Send what you have, she said. If it is real, it is actionable. I thanked her, ended the call, and opened my laptop at the kitchen table before Tessa even woke up. I pulled my spreadsheet, the foundation filings, and the photo timestamps into one folder, then started drafting the email. I hovered over the send button for a long beat, then I saved the email as a draft and closed the laptop like I had all the time in the world. When Tessa came downstairs, I acted normal and asked if she wanted coffee, and she kissed my cheek like we were still on the same team. I watched her face while she sipped, and I kept my voice easy. So what's the gala schedule look like? I asked, like I was trying to be a supportive husband. Who's speaking, who's sitting where, and who are these partners everybody keeps hinting about? She answered too fast, like she had rehearsed it for me. It's simple, she said. There's a cocktail hour, then Mom does a speech, then the partnership announcement, and then we do photos with the important people. I nodded and asked for names because details make liars sweat. She gave them to me anyway, and she even smiled like she liked me taking interest. It will mean a lot if you're just present, she added, then touched my arm like she was sealing a deal. I told her I'll be there, and I let her believe I meant it the way she wanted. Late that night, my phone buzzed with a message from Trent, no greeting and no explanation. He sent 3 email chains as screenshots, and my stomach tightened as I scrolled. Kendra approved payments to the same consulting vendor I had flagged, and Marilyn replied, route it through the foundation line item, like it was a grocery list. Then I saw the one that hit hardest, a message from Tessa to Marilyn that said, he'll sign if we make it about unity. My wife had written it like she was talking about a stubborn contractor, not her husband. I forwarded everything to my attorney with one line. We move before they do. He called me back within minutes, voice sharp and awake. Get me your public record summary and your timeline, he said, and do not warn anyone in that family. I told him, I'm not warning them, and I started printing and scanning until the sky outside the kitchen window went from black to gray. Before sunrise, my attorney and I packaged the public records, the lien summaries, and Trent's screenshots into a clean, time-stamped packet. I sent it to Diane Morrow, and through Gordon's contact at the bank, I sent the same packet to the lender's risk team with one request, independent review handled quietly. I did not write like a hurt husband, and I did not sound dramatic. I wrote like a professional handing over a problem before it became a lawsuit. Gordon called later and kept it plain. They are not in a rough patch, he said. They are close to violating franchise standards, and if they lose the brand name, the revenue drops hard. I asked where Spencer fit, and Gordon said, that partnership is a life raft, not a bonus, and your signature is the weight they're trying to strap to your ankle. Then he added the part I hadn't seen coming. Your granddad's estate still holds a quiet position in a regional lender they use, and if you make the right noise with evidence, the loan committee will listen. I had my attorney draft a short letter for gala night, simple language with teeth, saying I would not sign a guarantee, and that any documents presented under social pressure were invalid in my view. It also requested an immediate independent review of Hollis accounts by a third party, and it read like a boundary instead of a threat. The day before the gala, I got a haircut, pulled on a tailored charcoal suit, and buckled my granddad's old watch onto my wrist. Then I grabbed my car keys and walked out the front door, letting it close behind me. Gala night came fast, and by the time we reached Richmond, the suit felt like armor. Tessa sat rigid beside me, smoothing her dress like she could control the night with her hands. A valet took the car at a restored historic venue, chandeliers spilling light through tall windows. Inside was white tablecloths, cold champagne, and smiles that never warmed up. A sign called it the 25th anniversary celebration of the Hollis wellness brand, but the guest list was all lenders, franchise reps, and local press. That was not a party, it was an announcement. Every table had place cards and little branded menus, and a photographer hovered near the stage, testing his flash. The air smelled like candles and fresh linen, but underneath it was sweat and panic. When we stepped in, heads turned, and Tessa tightened her grip on my arm. Marilyn saw us and froze for half a beat, just long enough to show she had not planned for me to look like I belonged. Then she swept over and said, "There you are, we have been waiting," and pulled us into her circle like she was showing off a purchase. Kendra slid in with a wine glass and a mean little smile. "Grant, you clean up well," she said, then leaned close and asked where I rented the suit. I kept my voice low and answered, "Same place you rent your confidence," and she blinked hard before she backed off. Diane Morrow stood off to the side near a column, watching everything like she was counting tells. Gordon moved through the room without attaching himself to the family, stopping for short conversations that looked serious. Trent arrived late, face tight, and gave me a quick nod that felt like support and apology at the same time. Warren looked gray under the lights, the suit hanging on him, and he stared at the floor whenever Marilyn spoke. Gordon's eyes met mine once, and he gave a tiny nod like he understood exactly what I came to do. Marilyn hooked her arm through Tessa's and mine and guided us toward a small side room. "Just a quick family moment," she said, sweet words with a hard grip. Inside sat a notary, the family attorney, and a folder on a table with a pen placed dead center like it was the whole point. Tessa hovered near the door, eyes down, like she already knew what was in that folder. Marilyn shut the door and turned her smile on me like a blade. "We just want you aligned with us, Grant, because a real husband would do this without making it ugly," she said, and the attorney slid the folder closer without meeting my eyes. I picked up the pen, rolled it between my fingers, nodded like I was thinking, and asked, calm and clear, "Before I sign anything, can you tell me why your foundation paid a consulting vendor the same week your payroll cleared, 6 separate times this year?" And the room went quiet in a way that was not polite anymore. Marilyn tried to laugh, but her throat caught and the sound died in her chest. Kendra went straight to anger and said, "That is a lie, and you are trying to ruin us," while Tessa stood there like she had been hit, blinking hard and not moving. I did not raise my voice because I did not need volume to make truth hurt. I looked at the attorney and said, "Answer one question before you start smiling again. Does this guarantee attach to my separate assets, including inheritance?" He kept his eyes on the paper and cleared his throat, and that dodge told me everything. Marilyn snapped her folder shut like she could reset the moment, then opened the door and marched us back toward the ballroom. We stepped out as the MC called her name for a few words, and she glided to the microphone with that donor smile. She talked about legacy, family unity, the next chapter, and a strategic partnership that would secure growth, and people nodded along because they wanted it to be true. Spencer was in the audience, smiling wide like he already owned a seat at the table. Tessa kept her eyes forward and her hands clasped tight, refusing to look at him even when he shifted closer. Then Marilyn beamed and said, "Please welcome our wonderful son-in-law, Grant," like she was handing me a gift. I walked up because she had built a stage and I was done letting her use it against me. I took the mic and said, "Thank you for coming, and I will not take long." Then I held the room steady with my eyes. "I was presented with documents tonight designed to make me responsible for Hollis corporate debts," I said, keeping my hands still. I did not wave papers, and I did not threaten anyone because I had already sent the facts where they mattered. There are overdue vendor suits, stacked liens, and questionable payments routed through a charity foundation, I said, and there are internal emails showing Kendra approving those transfers. I looked at the lenders and added, "Any partnership announced tonight should be paused until an independent review is completed." Diane Morrow stepped forward, face flat, and said to the Hollis attorney, "I need the full compliance packet and supporting ledgers immediately, and I expect cooperation." The attorney's posture changed, and so did the room. I turned toward Tessa and lowered my voice, but I made sure the people nearest us heard it. "I also know about Spencer," I said, and I kept it clean because I was not there to entertain anybody. "I have seen enough to know I was not a husband in your life. I was a role in your family's schedule." And she opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Spencer shifted like he wanted to jump in, and Gordon's hand landed on his shoulder, light and final, and Spencer stayed quiet. I walked back to the side room table, picked up the pen, and set it into Marilyn's hand. "You wanted a signature night," I said, "just not mine." Then I worked my wedding band off, left it beside the folder, and walked out as the whispers caught up in the hall. The next morning I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. I made coffee in my quiet kitchen, dropped my suit at the cleaner on Eastern Avenue, and went to the office because routine was the only thing I trusted. I answered emails, signed off on a client report, and pretended my stomach wasn't still twisted from the night before hard. I kept my phone face down during the morning meeting, but I could feel it buzzing in my pocket like a live wire. Around lunchtime, Trent called from his car and sounded like he'd been chewing nails. "Kendra's telling everyone you had some midlife breakdown," he said. "But the franchise team already scheduled site audits, and the bank froze a line of credit pending review." He paused, then added, "Warren didn't yell. He just went quiet, like a man watching his house burn from the curb." Over the next 2 weeks, the consequences showed up as regular paperwork instead of fireworks. Diane's team issued a formal notice to the Hollis brand about compliance concerns, and a local business reporter started sniffing around the foundation. Gordon told me, after the fact, that one lender flagged suspicious activity to regulators once they saw the same vendor patterns I'd raised. None of it was my attack. It was the system doing what it does when somebody stops covering the windows. Tessa moved out on a Wednesday while I was at work. There was no screaming scene and no last-minute speech. Just a half-empty closet when I got home and a note on the counter that said she never meant for it to get that far. That night, she texted me 6 times asking to talk, then flipped to blaming me for humiliating her family. I didn't answer. I forwarded every message to my lawyer and kept my replies in my head. The rest came to me in pieces, the way it always does when a family starts eating itself. Trent told me he found a second set of books on Kendra's laptop, and he sounded sick saying it out loud. Gordon said Spencer's side backed away fast once they realized the debt load was worse than advertised. A former Hollis manager emailed me anonymously to say thank you, because they'd been warned for years not to ask questions. I saved that email and closed my laptop. The only time I saw Marilyn again was on the news, walking out of a courthouse with her coat pulled tight and her jaw clenched like she could bite through the camera lens. It wasn't dramatic, it was slow. Board resignations, canceled events, donors stepping back, and people pretending they never posed for photos with her. A month later, I took my granddad's watch in for service and set up a small scholarship at the community college he'd attended for accounting students who grew up without much. No press release and no gala. I signed the transfer letter, sealed the envelope, and slid it into the outgoing mail slot. Hold up before you go. Can I ask you this? If you've got hype, tap it, subscribe, and like. Then comment, would you sign for peace or expose them publicly?